go ahead and get started with this first story coming out of Niger. Now, for those who are not aware, there was a coup recently in Niger. This is getting a lot of attention in reference to international news. I think CNN mentioned something about it briefly. But first and foremost, I want to kind of break down what this is about, because I don't want people to get confused. And you guys know how I am when it comes to foreign policy. I want to make sure I can explain things in a way that everybody can understand, because not everybody is paying attention to these things. But to start out, I do want to say, and I forgot to put this there, but shout out to Danny Haifong, because he said the U.S. sent 1,000 troops to Niger after a coup took out their preferred leader. Now, that is going to be very important when we get into this story, because we've seen this happen before, right? We saw this happen in Libya, other countries as well. So I wanted to mention that so you understand the depth of this. So let's go ahead and get started with a little bit of background here. Niger coup, simple guide to what's happening. Now, just keep in mind, this is the BBC. BBC 1, BBC 2, BBC 3, BBC 4, BBC 5. President Bazoum was the first elected leader to succeed another in Niger since independence in 1960. I'm going to make this bigger, because I did notice on the screen it looks kind of small. Okay, there we go. In 1960, now his captors have suspended the country's constitution and installed General Abdurrahman as head of state. Niger is a key part of the African region known as the Sahel, a belt of land that stretches from the Atlantic Sea to the Red Sea. The area is plagued by jihadists and beset by military regimes. Western nations have looked to Niger as a bulwark against further disorder and spreading Russian influence in the region, but that turned out to be short-lived. Now, it's important that you hear that, because, of course, yes, this does involve Russia in some way, of course, as well. So I just want you to understand the full scope of what this is really about. Why is it important? As the largest country in West Africa, it is a bellwether state in many ways. Politically, it had been seen as an example of relative democratic stability in recent years, while its neighbors, Mali and Burkina Faso, had already succumbed to military coup. Strategically, it hosts French and U.S. military bases and is seen as a key partner in the fight against Islamic insurgents. Now, I'm going to pause here for just a second. I would argue those bases shouldn't be there to begin with. We've seen this before. We have military bases there to protect the country against, Islamic radicals, extremists, etc. We've heard this multiple times before. They're also going to stress the importance of having those bases there in order to protect some form of democracy. Now, where have we heard that before? Libya, right? Let's continue. In fact, the U.S. State Department describes Niger as important as a linchpin for stability in Sahel and a reliable counterterrorism partner against various Islamic groups linked to either the Islamic State or Al-Qaeda. Doesn't this sound familiar to you guys? Here we go again. Economically, this is important. It is rich in uranium, producing 7% of all global supplies. The radioactive metal looms so large in the country's economy that one of the grandest thoroughfares in the capital, Niamey, is named for the Avenue de Uranium. However, Niger's people consistently rank as having the lowest standards of living in the world. Now, here's a country that's economically rich in uranium, but they're proceeding to inform you that the people there have one of the lowest standards of living anywhere in the world. Now, why is that? Once again, we have a country that is particularly rich in a certain resource, but the people there are neglected. The people there are poor. And that is because their resources have either been stolen or they've been exploited. Doesn't that sound familiar to you? Let's continue. Here's the Sahel region of Africa. So I want to show you the map so you can see where we're talking about here. You'll see Morocco, Western Sahara. You'll see Mali. There's Burkina Faso. and there's Niger. So Niger is right between Chad and Mali. Interesting, funny thing about Chad. I just want to point this out because people are really funny. There was actually a quiz where like this reporter was questioning people on the street and they were asking them to name 5 countries in Africa. And one of the countries that everybody named was Chad. Chad. Anywho, moving on. Why did the coup happen? The Sahel region is a turbulent and unstable part of the world, and democracy is currently in retreat here. See what I meant about them explaining that we need to be there because of democracy? Similar to Libya, this is what they're trying to use as an excuse. Violent Islamic groups have gained ground by controlling territory and conducting attacks in the tri-border region between Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. The mutinous soldiers in Niger have cited this worsening security situation as a reason for their uprising. Although Niger was handling the insurgencies far better than Mali and Burkina Faso before their own coups, the growing unrest has led some to believe that only harsh military crackdowns can solve the problem. Does that sound familiar? That also sounds familiar. If we're looking domestically, that reminds me of Cop City. The only way that we can solve this crime issue, the increase in crime, is to have more police. And not just more police, but militarized police. Same story over and over again. Hence the popular support that the coup seems to enjoy in some quarters. However, it is far clear that a military junta would have greater success in tackling the insurgents than the recently ousted government. The takeovers in neighboring countries have not made much difference. And then it goes on to say here, adding to the instability in the region, climate change is causing desertification to spread southwards from the Sahara into the Sahel. Experts say temperatures in the Sahel are rising faster than anywhere in the world. Now, keep in mind that was the BBC. But I want to show you another interpretation of what is happening in Niger. And we got to give shout out to Nico, by the way. Nico House has been crushing it. He's been doing these short clips through Hotspot. And so Nico is going to explain this, I think, in a narrative that you may not hear on mainstream media. He said France wants their puppet back in power so they can continue plundering Niger for its uranium. So that's another thing to mention, that France does depend on that uranium from this country. So people in this country are starting to rise up. We've been seeing this happen over the past couple of months where other countries in Africa are also like, no, we're not dealing with this Western influence and imperialism anymore. They're starting to rise up and say, we don't want you here. And why don't you let us keep our own resources and you go find your own? So let's go ahead and get into this clip here from Nico, because I think he does a really good job at explaining his side of this story. Listen to this.
So in case you missed the news, Niger has had a military coup, and I'm letting you know right now, before all the Western media tells you they want democracy back in Niger, let me tell you the real reason for this coup and why not all coups are created equally. This is Mohamed Bazoum, the former or current, depending on how you look at it, president of Niger. As you can see, he's a little bit cozy with Emmanuel Macron. This is important, and we're going to talk about it in a second. You see, Macron is actually the president of France, and 70% of France's electricity comes from nuclear power. Niger is the 4th largest producer of uranium in the world, and guess who predominantly mines their uranium? A French company called Areva. Guess whose company provides most of the nuclear power to France? Areva. Now, despite Niger basically being a French colony, their president basically being a puppet of Macron in France, only 1 in 7 people who live in Niger have power.
Pause right there. You see the difference? How they're taking resources from Niger to power their own country. Meanwhile, the people who actually live in Niger, only 1 in 7 of them have power. Imperialism. This is terrible. And it's not just Niger. This is just one example. There's other countries that have been dealing with this as well. So when people call these countries third world countries or poor countries, these countries are not poor. They're rich in resources. In fact, if you look all throughout countries in Africa, there's plenty of resources. The problem is the resources are stolen. They're taken from those countries. Let's continue.
Despite the majority of their number one resource, which provides power, going to France basically for free. So because of the president's loyalty to Macron and unwillingness to fight for Nigerians, people in Niger literally can't keep their lights on if they've ever had lights at all.
Pause right here before we continue. One of the things I told you guys a couple months ago when we were talking about social democracy, we were talking about countries in Europe that are able to offer benefits such as unlimited vacation, unlimited maternity leave, like everybody has healthcare, all those things. And I agree with all of those things. But one of the things that is often left out, and Second Thought really did a really great video about this, by the way. I don't know if you guys watch Second Thought, you should watch him. But he did a great video about this, explaining how one of the things that they do is, though they may not be exploiting the people necessarily in their European country, but they do tend to exploit people in the global South and also people in countries in Africa. And that's how they're able to do what they do. This is how France is able to just have, take the uranium from Niger and empower its country. And the people who are in Niger, most of them don't even have lights on. So even though you don't see the exploitation happening in those countries and everybody has all the universal policies, which I agree with those policies, you have to come up with a better way to implement them without exploiting people in other countries as if they don't matter. And that continues to happen. Colonialism is still alive and well. No, people are not still loading up, people from Africa and pulling them over on slave ships and making them slaves in the United States and other countries as well. But it's being done in a different way. And those people still have to struggle. Let's continue.
While France plunders Niger for its natural resources. And you're going to have plenty of Western media people and leaders from the Western world coming out and saying they want democracy in Niger. But let's not forget, this is the same US and France that overthrew Gaddafi in Libya, and we literally have open market slavery in Libya right now in 2023, and they haven't done anything about it because they don't.
Because see, that's what happens when the US tries to poke into another country and tries to tell them, they have democracy. Let's see what we can do here to protect their democracy. And then the people in Libya ended up worse off than they were after US intervention. And that's a common tale. It continues to happen. A lot of people don't talk about this. A lot of times when people bring up people like Barack Obama, they don't mention this either. They don't mention the fact that Libya basically had slave trade brought back because of U.S. intervention, when we would have been better off leaving them alone and letting them handle their own business. How would you like it if another country came to the United States and started overthrowing our democracy and telling us what to do? It's hard to fathom that sometimes. It's hard to fathom that because it doesn't happen. We have to try to start putting ourselves in their shoes. Let's continue. I'll go back a little bit because I cut Nico off like mid-sentence.
They haven't done anything about it because they don't care about democratically elected individuals unless they play for the team of the United States, France, and NATO. And you hear this talk of sanctions, and I'm thinking to myself, like, how much more can you sanction them? You're literally taking everything they have already, which is why the coup even happened. But I digress. All calls for Western involvement in Niger are only driven by profiteering and plundering. They don't give a damn about democracy. And if they did, they wouldn't be in the situation in Niger to begin with.
Well said. Well said, Nico. So yes, sanctions, as you can imagine, is also a part of this as well. I want to bring up this part here in reference to the resources. Richard hit it on the head. France has the fourth largest gold reserves, 2.436 tons, without a single gold mine in France. Mali, which was occupied by France, does not have any gold reserves in its bank, although it has 860 gold mines and produces 50 tons per year. How did France get all that gold? This is the same thing I said about the royal family when some people said I was being too harsh. My bad. But when King Charles was parading around and they had his coronation, And I said, look at all that stolen wealth. Because it's true. This is what they do. They take from these countries as if these people don't matter, as if they don't have any rights. Now, I want to give you an update in reference to this, and this is coming from Africa Archives. It says that France suspended aid to Niger after the coup. Niger suspended the export of gold and uranium to France. France will evacuate its nationals from Niger. So this was the right thing for Niger to do, to suspend the export of gold and uranium from France. I mean, like, you don't owe them anything. Now, this is not to say that France won't try to take it anyway. But I'm going to tell you something about that, something in reference to what they said may happen if they see their faces show up there again. Now, this clip here from Breakthrough News says Russia is family for Africa, declared the president of Burkina Faso at the Russia-African Summit in St. Petersburg. So I want to go ahead and play this clip. I think this is important for people to hear because it appears that they do consider Russia to be on their side. They consider Russia to be an ally. He goes on to say that Russia to them is like family. Listen to this.
On se sent en famille en ce sens que la Russie est une famille aussi pour l'Afrique.
Russia is a family for Africa too.
C'est une famille parce que nous avons la même histoire.
We are family because we have the same history.
La Russie a consenti d'énormes sacrifices pour libérer le monde du nazisme.
Russia made enormous sacrifices to free the world from Nazism during World War II.
Pendant la Seconde Guerre mondiale. Les peuples africains, nos grands-pères, ont été déportés de force aussi pour aider l'Europe.
African people were also forcibly deported to help Europe get rid of Nazism.
À se débarrasser du nazisme. Nous partageons la même histoire en ce sens que nous sommes les peuples oubliés du monde.
We share the same history in the sense that we are the forgotten peoples of the world.
Qu'ils soient dans les livres d'histoire, dans les documentaires ou films, on tend donc à balayer le rôle prépondérant qu'a joué.
We tend to dismiss the key role played by Russia in Africa. He's referring to the history books.
De la Russie et de l'Afrique dans cette lutte contre le nazisme. Pour ce qui concerne le Burkina Faso, aujourd'hui nous sommes confrontés depuis plus de 8 ans à la forme de manifestation la plus barbare, la plus violente.
For more than 8 years, they've been confronted with barbaric forms of neo-colonialism and imperialism.
Du néocolonialisme, de l'impérialisme. L'esclavage qu'on tend encore à nous imposer.
You see that? Slavery continues to impose itself on us. Different forms, but still.
Nos dévanciers nous ont bien appris une chose. L'esclave qui n'est pas capable d'assumer sa révolte ne mérite pas que l'on s'apitoie sur son sort. Nous ne nous apitoyons pas sur nos sorts, on ne demande pas que quelqu'un s'apitoie sur notre sort.
Not asking for pity. We do not feel sorry for ourselves. We're not asking you to feel sorry for us.
Le peuple burkinabé a décidé de lutter contre les terroristes.
The people of Burkina Faso have decided to fight against terrorism in order to relaunch their
En
development.
mesure de relancer son développement. Dans cette lutte, des vaillants peuples, des vaillantes populations se sont engagées à prendre les armes face au terrorisme.
People have decided to take up arms in defense of terrorism. This we affectionately call the VDP of
Que
volunteers.
nous avons affectueusement appelé les VDP, des volontaires. Nous sommes surpris de voir les impérialistes traiter ces VDP de milices et de tout.
So what they are referring to, what the French people are referring to as militias, he's saying that they refer to those people as VDPs, the volunteers. So this is why it's important to hear the other side of the story.
C'est décevant parce qu'en Europe, lorsque des peuples prennent les armes pour défendre leur patrie, on les traite de patriotes.
Woo! He said in Europe, when people take up arms to defend their homeland, they're considered to be patriots. You guys see this? This is an important point to make because when you see other groups, whether it's in countries in Africa, Haiti, Middle East, etc., when they do that, they're called terrorists, they're called militias. They're not considered to be patriots, so to speak.
Mais là n'est pas le problème. Ce qui est le problème, c'est de voir des chefs d'État africains qui n'apporte rien à ces peuples qui se battent, mais qui chantent la même chose que les impérialistes en nous traitant de milices, en nous traitant donc d'hommes qui ne respectent pas les droits de l'homme.
They're calling them men that don't respect human rights. Which human rights are we talking about?
Droits de l'homme, parle-t-on. Nous nous offusquons contre cela et c'est honteux. Il faut que nous, chefs d'État africains, nous arrêtons de nous comporter donc en marionnettes qui dansent à chaque fois.
So he's calling out the African heads of states. He said they need to stop misbehaving and acting like puppets. I feel like you would never hear our politicians speak this way. You know, I feel like you would never hear them, say this about other politicians that we have, not the ones who are currently in office. Every time the imperialists pull the string.
Que les impérialistes tirent sur les ficelles. Hier, le président Vladimir Poutine a annoncé donc l'envoi de céréales en Afrique. Nous sommes bien contents.
That's another piece that a lot of people aren't mentioning. We talked about the grain, not renewing the grain deal. Vladimir Putin was not renewing that in reference to Ukraine. But here is a leader here from Burkina Faso explaining to you that Vladimir Putin actually is going to deliver grain to countries in Africa. And I haven't heard this really discussed on mainstream media. So this is why it's important to hear other sources of media.
Disons merci pour cela. Mais aussi, c'est un message passé à nos chefs d'État africains. Parce qu'au prochain forum, nous ne devrons pas venir ici sans avoir assuré, pour ceux qui ne connaissent pas la guerre, l'autosuffisance alimentaire de nos peuples. Nous devons prendre l'expérience de ceux qui ont pu déjà atteindre cela en Afrique, tisser de bonnes relations ici et tisser de meilleures relations avec la Fédération de Russie.
So he's talking about his people having food. He said the Russian Federation so that we can meet the needs of our people.
Pouvoir assouvir les besoins de nos populations. Gloire à nos peuples, dignité à nos peuples, victoire à nos peuples. La patrie ou la mort, nous vaincrons. Merci, camarades.
Okay, so you're probably not going to see that on mainstream media. And I do want to show a little bit here how one talked about the Niger coup. This video here says France denies plotting to intervene militarily in Niger as tensions rise in Sahel. Of course, they're going to deny it, but here we go.
Niger remains on the edge days after a successful military coup. Reports of evacuation of French citizens are now emerging from the African nation. Earlier pictures emerged of ousted President Mohamed Bazoum's meeting with Chadian President Mahamat Idris Deby. This is the 7th military takeover in less than 3 years in West and Central Africa. The former French colony is the latest on the list. Reports claim that a message was sent from the French embassy to French citizens living in Niger, which is now under military rule. President Bazoum made his first public appearance in a tweeted photo since being driven out of office, in which the ousted leader could be seen smiling next to the Chadian president. Deby is in Niger to mediate between the coup leaders and the government. The coup leaders have also managed to garner support from Burkina Faso and Mali. The two nations, also under military leadership, have issued a warning stating that any international military intervention in Niger will be seen and reacted to as declaration of war.
That part right there, that's the part I wanted you guys to hear. So they've made this announcement that any Western military intervention in Niger will be seen as a declaration of war. They are making a statement here. They are letting Western countries know that they do not want them intervening in their country, in their politics, so to speak, either. They don't want them coming there. The military bases that are there from the U.S. military bases and the French U.S. military bases, like I said before, those bases shouldn't be there in the first place anyway, but they are there. So they're letting them know, show up here if you want to, but you might have to catch these hands, is basically what they're saying.
Les gouvernements de transition du Burkina Faso et du Mali sont profondément indignés et surpris par le déséquilibre observé.
Any military intervention against Niger is tantamount to a declaration of war against Burkina Faso.
Entre, d'une part, la célérité et l'attitude aventurière de certains responsables politiques.
And Mali, warning that any military intervention against Niger would entail a withdrawal of
d'Afrique de l'Ouest, désireux d'utiliser la force armée pour établir un ordre constitutionnel dans un pays souverain. Et
Burkina Faso and Mali from ECOWAS, as well as the adoption of self-defense measures in support.
D'autre part, l'inaction, l'indifférence et la complicité passive de ces organisations et de ces responsables politiques à aider les États et les peuples victimes de terrorisme depuis une décennie et abandonnés à leur sort.
And we'll go ahead and pause that there. So they're not playing around. I mean, can you blame them? Now, I want to show you how the people feel about this, because they're saying here Niger belongs to us. I want to show you this clip here from NBC News, and I want to show you what the citizens of Niger have to say. It's not just the political leaders there. It's the people. Listen to this. Look at all those people. Thousands of military coup supporters marched through the capital waving Russian flags and condemning former colonial power France. You guys see what's happening here? This is what NATO, I think, is really afraid of. All these other countries saying no to those NATO allies and saying yes to some of those countries that are a part of BRICS. Let's continue. It says coup backers were seen attacking the French embassy and burning French flags in protests organized with the new military leaders.
Pendant 12 ans de régime, le quotidien des Nigériens n'a pas changé.
I'm going to pause and read this. This part's important. For 12 years, the daily lives of the people of Niger have remained unchanged. Okay.
Par conséquent, les Nigériens appelés à sortir massivement.
As a result, Nigerians called for an end to this policy.
Dehors cette politique. Nous sommes également sortis pour dire à ce petit Macron.
We also come out to tell this little Macron from France that Niger belongs to us. I love how they called him Little Macron. He's tiny.
De la France, que le Niger nous appartient. C'est à nous de faire ce que nous voulons de Niger. Ce que nous voulons, nous traitons.
Okay, he said it's up to us to do what we want with Niger. It's what we want. We deal with who we want and how we want.
Avec qui nous voulons et comme nous voulons.
Mm-hmm. West African leaders have threatened to use force if military junta fails to reinstate ousted President Mohamed Bazoum within 1 week. And there you go. So I wanted to show you that there. So yeah, there are many changes that are happening in countries in Africa, and not just Africa, but the global South. You know, people are starting to rise up. And I think that because some of these countries have joined BRICS, I think it gives the people a little bit more, I don't know, energy, or a little bit more, I guess, like guts to like just stand up and push back. This is something they've probably been wanting to do for a long time. But it's important that you have people that are backing you and support you in pushing out these Western countries from intervening in your country and taking your resources. It's not something that one man can just stand up to. You got to have the support of the other people in the country. And they have that apparently. And so here we are. If you have not had a chance to do so, go ahead and smash that like button. That helps me with the algorithm. Thank you. The little Marco just did it for me, man. Little Macron. Yeah. The little Macron. That did it for me. Top G says all these European neocolonialists take and give nothing, less than nothing. JB says, I appreciate you covering parts of this story I didn't get to. Thank you so much, Sabs. This story is actually exciting to me because this means they're ending imperial rule. That's right. And Leslie says, the government in the US did the same thing. Oh, to Myanmar, installed their puppet government. The junta overthrew the American puppet government and is now funding terrorists to put their puppet government. Yep. 100%. I'll take those comments on Rockfin, Eric. Thank you. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, JVB. Sabs makes listening to the news about Armageddon fun. That's interesting. Bless her for her ebullient personality, but she is tough as nails, mind you. Thank you for that. And thank you for the tip, Roger. Sabrina, another satisfied customer I introduced to Sabrina. I got him to subscribe. He was like, yo, I like the way she presents her stuff and her presentation and delivery. Like I keep telling you, stay the course, stay on mission. Don't let yourself be dragged into the BS and they will come to you. How would you feel about another country overthrowing our government? Watch what you ask. I may join them. They come looking for our politicians and Supreme Court justices. I'm going to be like, yeah, there they go over there. That one's hiding over there. That one's behind that thing over there. Yeah, get them. Oh, I better say because YouTube. The views of Roger Meadows are not necessarily supported by the show.